Chinhi could make grown men disappear with a single phone call, but he couldn't stop his baby from crying in the middle of Chicago's most expensive restaurant. Then an Egyptian woman he'd never met did the unthinkable. She unbuttoned her dress right there in front of everyone, took his son, and gave the child what Chinhi never could, creating a debt between a mafia boss and a stranger that would either save them both or destroy everything they had left. The baby's screams cut through the expensive silence of Marcello's like a knife through silk. Chinhi bounced his 6-month-old son against his broad shoulder, trying everything he'd tried 100 times before. Nothing worked. Victor's tiny face was red and soaked with tears, his little fists punching the air like he was fighting invisible enemies. Around them, wealthy diners pretended not to stare, but Chinhi felt every single pair of eyes burning into his back. He was a man who commanded respect with just a look, a man whose name made grown men shake with fear in the darkest corners of Chicago. But right now, in this moment, he felt completely powerless. "Shh, Victor, please," Chinhi whispered, his deep Korean accent thick with exhaustion. He rubbed the baby's back in circles, the way the doctor had shown him. "Papa's here. Papa's got you." But Victor only cried harder, his wails echoing off the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. A woman at the next table frowned and whispered something to her husband. An older couple gathered their things and left early, shaking their heads. Chinhi's jaw tightened. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Katya died on the delivery table, her hand going cold in his as Victor took his first breath. 3 months of trying to be both mother and father to a baby who seemed to cry every single moment Chinhi held him. 3 months of failing. He stood up, ready to leave and spare everyone the noise. When he saw her, she was sitting alone at a corner table, a book open beside her untouched pasta. But she wasn't reading anymore. She was watching him with the most unusual eyes he'd ever seen. They were light brown, almost golden, like honey held up to sunlight. Her skin was smooth and deep tan, her black hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple green dress that hugged her curves in a way that made Chinhi's breath catch, even through his frustration. Their eyes locked for just a second, and something passed between them. Something Chinhi hadn't felt since before Katya got sick during the pregnancy. Something he thought had died inside him. Then, the woman closed her book, stood up, and walked straight toward him. Chinhi tensed. He was used to women approaching him. Usually, they wanted something. Money, protection, a taste of the dangerous life they thought he led. But this woman moved differently. There was no seduction in her walk, no practiced smile, just purpose. She stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, jasmine, and something else, something warm and sweet that made his pulse quicken. "May I?" she asked, her voice soft but confident. She had an accent he couldn't quite place. Not American. "May you what?" Chinhi's voice came out rougher than he intended. Victor was still screaming against his chest. Without answering, the woman reached out her arms. Not to him, to Victor. Every protective instinct in Chinhi's body roared to life. He pulled his son closer. "I don't think so. Your baby is hungry," she said simply, meeting his eyes without fear. Most people couldn't hold his gaze for more than a few seconds. She didn't look away. "Not for milk from a bottle. He needs what you can't give him." Chinhi's mind raced. Was she insane? Was this some kind of trick? His enemies knew about Victor, knew that the baby was his only weakness now. Was she here to hurt his son? But something in her eyes stopped him from calling his guards. There was no threat there, no hidden agenda, just a deep, ancient knowing that made him feel like she could see straight through all his walls. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Someone who can help." She stepped closer, and Chinhi caught himself breathing in more of her scent. "Please, let me try." Victor's screams reached a new pitch, and several more diners stood to leave. The restaurant manager hovered nearby, clearly wanting to say something but too afraid of Chinhi to actually do it. Against every logical thought in his head, Chinhi found himself loosening his grip. The woman took Victor with the gentle confidence of someone who'd held many babies before. She cradled him against her chest, And then, right there in the middle of the restaurant, she did something that made Chinhi's heart stop. She unbuttoned the top of her dress. "What are you doing?" Chinhi stepped forward, ready to take Victor back. "Saving your evening," she said calmly. She adjusted her dress so that everything stayed modest and proper, but positioned Victor exactly where he needed to be. "Turn around if it makes you uncomfortable." Chinhi didn't turn around. He couldn't. He stood frozen, watching as this complete stranger nursed his son. Within seconds, Victor's cries faded to whimpers. Within a minute, the baby was quiet, feeding peacefully, his tiny hand resting against the woman's bronze skin. The silence felt like a miracle. "How did you do that?" Chinhi breathed. His chest felt tight, his throat thick. When was the last time he'd heard actual silence instead of crying? The woman looked down at Victor with a soft smile. "I'm a nurse. Back home in Cairo, I worked in the maternity ward. I know what babies need." She glanced up at Chinhi, and those golden eyes hit him like a physical touch. Sometimes they just need to feel a mother's heartbeat, to remember they're safe. "He doesn't have a mother," Chinhi said quietly, the words hurt coming out. They always did. Something shifted in the woman's expression. Not pity, something deeper, understanding, loss that matched his own. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she looked back down at Victor. "But he has you, and right now, he has me." They stood like that for a long moment, the noise of the restaurant fading away until it felt like they were the only three people in the world. Chinhi couldn't stop staring at her, at the gentle way she held his son, at the natural grace in every movement, at the way Victor, who never seemed comfortable with anyone, looked peaceful for the first time in weeks. "What's your name?" Chinhi asked. His voice came out lower, rougher. The voice he used in dark rooms during private negotiations. But this wasn't business. This was something else entirely. Rania. She said it like a song. Rania. Rania. He repeated, tasting the name on his tongue. "I'm Chinhi. I know who you are." Her eyes flickered up again, and there was a spark of something in them. Something that made heat rush through Chinhi's body. "Everyone in this restaurant knows who you are, and yet you approached me anyway." He took a step closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Either you're very brave or very foolish. Maybe both." The corner of her mouth lifted in the smallest smile, and Chinhi felt it like a punch to his gut. "Or maybe I just couldn't watch a baby cry when I could help." Victor had finished feeding and was now asleep against Rania's chest. His little face finally relaxed. She buttoned her dress back up with one hand, moving with practiced ease. "Here," Chinhi said, reaching for his son. His fingers brushed against Rania's hand, and electricity shot up his arm. She felt it too. He saw her sharp intake of breath, the way her pupils widened slightly. "He's beautiful," Rania said softly, carefully transferring the sleeping baby back to Chinhi's arms. "You're very lucky. Stay." The word came out before Chinhi could stop it. "Have dinner with me, please." Rania hesitated, and for a terrible moment, Chinhi thought she would refuse, thought she would walk away, and he'd never see her again. The idea bothered him more than it should, more than was reasonable for a woman he'd known for less than 10 minutes. "I don't usually have dinner with strange men," Rania said slowly. "I'm not strange." Chinhi's lips curved into a smile. A real one. When was the last time he'd really smiled? "I'm dangerous. There's a difference." Rania's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look scared. Instead, something else flickered across her face. Interest, curiosity, and something warmer that made Chinhi's blood heat. "Dangerous men are exactly who I should avoid," she said. "Yes," Chinhi agreed. "You should." They stared at each other, and the air between them crackled with tension so thick Chinhi could almost taste it. "One dinner," Rania finally said, "because your son deserves a peaceful meal." They both knew that. End quote. Wasn't the real reason. And as Chinhi led her to his private table, Victor sleeping peacefully in his arms for the first time in months, He had the strangest feeling that his entire life had just changed. He just didn't know yet whether it was for better or worse. The waiter appeared instantly when Chinhi sat down, moving faster than he had for any other table all evening. "Mr. Volkov, your usual table is ready," the waiter said nervously, gesturing toward a private corner booth, separated from the main dining area by a silk curtain. "And we'll bring fresh appetizers immediately." "Thank you, Marcus." Chinhi's voice was calm, but there was power underneath it. The kind of power that came from never having to raise your voice to be obeyed. Rana followed him to the booth, very aware of how every staff member watched them, not with curiosity, with fear. She slid into the leather seat across from Chinhi, who was carefully arranging Victor in a travel bassinet the waiter had rushed over. "You come here often," Rana observed. "It wasn't a question. I own it." Chinhi looked up at her, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, along with several other restaurants in Chicago. "A businessman," Rana said slowly, remembering how he'd described himself earlier. Something like that. He settled back in his seat, and for the first time, she got a good look at him in proper light. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw with just a hint of stubble, dark hair swept back from his face. But it was his eyes that caught her. Deep brown, almost black, with shadows in them that spoke of things he'd seen, things he'd done. He wore his expensive suit like armor, every button perfect, every line sharp. This was not a man who asked for things. This was a man who took them. "So tell me, Rana from Cairo," Chinhi said, leaning forward slightly. "What brings an Egyptian nurse to Chicago?" The way he said her name, rolling the R slightly with his Korean accent, made something warm unfurl in her stomach. Rana picked up her water glass just to have something to do with her hands. "I needed to start over," she said simply. "After my family died." Chinhi's expression shifted, softened. "Tell me." There was something in his voice. Not just curiosity, real understanding. The kind that only came from knowing loss personally. "Car accident," Rana heard herself saying. She never talked about this, never. But something about this dangerous stranger made the words flow out. 2 years ago, my mother, father, and younger brother. All gone in one night. She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "I was supposed to be in the car too. But I stayed late at the hospital for a patient." "You blame yourself. It wasn't a question. Every day." Rana met his eyes. "Even though I know it's not logical. Even though I know there was nothing I could have done. Guilt doesn't follow logic." Chinhi's jaw tightened. "It just lives in you like a sickness. You understand. Again, not a question. More than you know." He glanced down at sleeping Victor. "My wife, Katya. She was healthy her whole pregnancy. Perfect checkups, no problems. Then during delivery, something went wrong. Internal bleeding. By the time the doctors realized what was happening, it was too late." His voice went rough. "She made me promise to take care of our son." Those were her last words. Rana felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." Chinhi looked up, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "If she hadn't died, I wouldn't have been here tonight. I wouldn't have met you." The air between them shifted, charged with something electric. Marcus appeared with plates of food neither of them had ordered. Bruschetta, calamari, a caprese salad that looked like art. He set everything down quickly and disappeared just as fast. "I took the liberty of ordering for us," Chinhi said. "Unless you have preferences I should know about." "I trust you." The words came out softer than Rana intended, and she saw something flash in Chinhi's eyes. Hunger, but not for food. They ate slowly, talking between bites. Rana told him about growing up in Cairo, about the noise and color and chaos of the city she loved, about medical school and choosing nursing because she wanted to help people with her hands, not just prescribe medicine from behind a desk, about arriving in Chicago 6 months ago with 2 suitcases and a work visa, trying to build a new life from nothing. Chinhi listened, like every word mattered, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. "And you?" Rana asked, reaching for her wine. Tell me about the restaurant business. Something flickered across Chinhi's face. Hesitation, maybe even guilt. It's complicated, he said finally. Complicated how? Let's just say I deal with difficult people, make hard decisions, do things that most people wouldn't understand. He held her gaze. Things that would probably scare you if you knew. Rana looked around the restaurant, at the expensive artwork on the walls, at the way the staff moved around Chinhi like he was a king, at the two large men in dark suits she'd noticed standing by the entrance, watching their table. You're not really a businessman, are you? She asked quietly. Chinhi went very still. What do you think I am? I think you're someone powerful. Someone dangerous. Rana surprised herself with her own boldness. I think people are afraid of you. And I think maybe they should be. For a long moment, Chinhi said nothing. Then, slowly, he smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf. Yes, he said simply. They should be. Rana should have felt scared, should have made an excuse and left, should have run as far from this man as possible. Instead, she leaned forward. Then, why aren't I? Chinhi's eyes darkened. Maybe you're smarter than I thought. Smart enough to recognize I would never hurt you. How do I know that? You don't. He reached across the table, and his fingers brushed against hers. The touch sent heat racing up her arm. But you're still here, still talking to me, still looking at me like you want to know more. Rana's heart pounded. Maybe I'm just curious. Curiosity is dangerous. Chinhi's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. The simple touch made her whole body aware of him, especially around men like me. Then maybe I like danger. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Chinhi's grip on her hand tightened slightly, and Rana saw his jaw clench, like he was holding himself back from something. They talked for 3 more hours. The restaurant emptied around them until they were the only customers left, but no staff member dared to interrupt. Chinhi told her about growing up in Moscow, about coming to America as a teenager with nothing. He didn't tell her exactly what he did now, but she could read between the lines, could see the violence in his scarred knuckles, the weight of command in how he held himself. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was drawn to him like a moth to flame. When Victor woke up fussing, Rana fed him again, while Chinhi watched with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hunger and sadness, and something else. Something that made her skin feel too tight. You're good with him, Chinhi said softly. Natural. I love children. Rana smiled down at Victor. Always have. He needs someone like you. Chinhi paused. I need someone like you. Their eyes met over the baby's head, and Rana forgot how to breathe. Finally, at midnight, they walked out together. One of Chinhi's men brought a black SUV around, but Chinhi waved him off. Let me drive you home, Chinhi said. I can take a cab. I want to. He stepped closer, and Rana had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was so tall, so broad. She felt small next to him, but not weak, protected. Please. During the drive to her small apartment in a modest neighborhood, they were quiet, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that happened when words weren't needed, when just being near each other was enough. Chinhi parked, but didn't turn off the engine. Victor slept peacefully in his car seat. I have a proposition, Chinhi said, his deep voice filling the dark car. I need help with Victor. Someone who knows babies. Someone he's comfortable with. He turned to face her. Be his nanny. I'll pay you double whatever you make at the hospital. Rana bit her lip. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because this isn't really about Victor, is it? Chinhi's expression shifted, became predatory. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. No, he admitted, it's not. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that I haven't been able to stop looking at you all night, that I haven't felt this alive since before my wife died, that every time you smile, I forget how to think. His thumb traced her jawline. It's about wanting to see you again. And again. and knowing that asking you on a date like a normal man isn't enough. Rainia's breath came faster. This is crazy. I don't even know you. Then get to know me. His face was so close now, she could feel his breath. Take the job. Spend time with Victor. Spend time with me. And if I say no, then I'll respect it. His hand dropped away, and Rania immediately missed the warmth. But I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Rania stared at him. At this dangerous, powerful man who was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that she should walk away now before she got in too deep. But she didn't want logic. For the first time since her family died, she wanted to feel something. Anything. Okay, she whispered. Chinhi's eyes flared with triumph, and something deeper, darker. Give me your phone. She handed it over, and he programmed his number in, then called himself so he'd have hers. I'll pick you up tomorrow at 9, he said, handing it back. We'll discuss details. Rania nodded and got out of the car on shaking legs. She made it all the way to her apartment door before her phone rang. It was past midnight. She knew who it was before she even looked. Hello? She answered. I couldn't wait until tomorrow. Chinhi's voice was rough, intimate in the darkness. Tell me something true, something real. Rania leaned against her door, smiling despite herself.
Like what?
Like whether you felt it too. That pull between us. Her heart hammered. Yes, I felt it. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice. Now tell me something else. What are you wearing? Chinhi. But she was laughing. Just curious. His voice dropped lower. Because I can't stop thinking about you in that green dress. The way it hugged your curves. The way you moved. Heat flooded through Rania's body. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? It's true. He paused. Tell me you're thinking about me too. I am, she admitted softly. They talked until the sun started to rise, about everything and nothing. And when Rania finally fell asleep, phone still in her hand, she dreamed of dark eyes and dangerous promises. She had no idea she'd just stepped into a world she could never escape. But maybe she didn't want to. Chinhi's house wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Rania stared up at the 3-story structure in the wealthy suburb of Oak Park, taking in the iron gates, the security cameras on every corner, the guards trying to look casual by the entrance. Behind the perfectly manicured lawn and elegant architecture lurked something darker, something that confirmed everything she'd suspected about Chinhi. The front door opened before she could knock. Chinhi stood there in dark jeans and a white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, Victor in his arms. He looked different than he had at the restaurant, more relaxed, more real, and somehow even more attractive. You came, he said, and there was relief in his voice. I said I would. Rania stepped inside, and her breath caught. The interior was stunning. High ceilings, modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in floods of natural light. But it felt empty somehow, like a showroom instead of a home. This is beautiful. It's lonely. Chinhi closed the door behind her. Until now. Their eyes met, and that electric current sparked between them again. Victor broke the moment by reaching for Rania with chubby hands. Someone's happy to see you, Chinhi said, with a soft smile, handing over the baby. Victor immediately snuggled into Rania's chest, and she felt her heart melt. Hello, little one. Did you miss me? We both did. Chinhi's voice was low, intimate, more than is probably healthy. Over the next week, Rania fell into a routine. She arrived at 9 each morning and left at 6 each evening. During the day, she cared for Victor, fed him, played with him, sang him Egyptian lullabies her mother had once sung to her. The baby thrived under her attention, crying less and smiling more. But it was the evenings that changed everything. At first, Rania tried to leave as soon as Victor went down for the night. But Chinhi always found reasons for her to stay. Just one cup of tea, just one conversation, just one more hour. The first night she stayed late, They sat on opposite ends of his massive leather couch, a careful distance between them. They talked about books they loved, movies that made them cry, childhood memories that still hurt. The second night, they sat closer. Their knees touched. Neither moved away. The third night, Chinhi opened a bottle of wine. They shared stories about their worst dates, their biggest regrets, their secret fears. Rana learned that Chinhi was terrified of being a bad father, that he lay awake at night wondering if Victor would grow up to hate him for the things he'd done. "You're a good father?" Rana said softly, wine making her bold. "I see how you look at him, how you hold him like he's the most precious thing in the world. He is." Chinhi's eyes found hers. "He and you." Ranya's breath caught. "Chinhi, I know it's too soon. I know I shouldn't feel this way." He shifted closer, and suddenly there was almost no space between them, but I can't help it. Every day you're here, this house feels less empty. I feel less empty. "I feel it too," Rania whispered. Her heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst. "It scares me." "Why?" "Because you're still a stranger. Because I know you're hiding things from me. Because this could all fall apart." She looked down at her hands. "Because I've already lost everyone I loved once. I don't think I could survive it again." Chinhi reached out and tilted her chin up with gentle fingers. "Then don't think. Just feel." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Rania didn't move. Couldn't move. When his lips touched hers, soft and questioning, her whole world shifted. The kiss started gentle, tender. Chinhi's hand cupped her face like she was something fragile and precious. But when Rania's lips parted on a sigh, something broke inside both of them. The kiss deepened, became urgent, hungry. Chinhi's fingers threaded through her hair, and Rania grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. She'd been kissed before, but never like this. Never like she was air, and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Chinhi rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't want you this much," he said roughly. "It's not fair to you." "Why not?" "Because you don't know who I really am. What I've done." He pulled back, and his eyes were tortured. "I've hurt people, Rania. Killed people. I live in a world of violence, and blood, and darkness. You're light. You're good. You shouldn't be anywhere near someone like me." Rania reached up and touched his face, feeling the stubble rough under her palm. "What if I don't care?" "You should care. You should run." But even as he said it, his arms tightened around her. "You should be terrified of me." "I'm not terrified." She kissed him softly. "I'm falling for you, and that's much scarier." Chinhi made a sound deep in his throat, somewhere between a groan and a growl. Then he was kissing her again, harder this time, more demanding. His hands slid down her back, pulling her against him until she could feel every hard plane of his body. Rania had never felt anything like this consuming need, this desperation. She climbed into his lap, straddling him, and Chinhi's hands gripped her hips hard enough to bruise. Rania. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a curse. "If we don't stop now, I won't be able to." "Then don't stop." She kissed his jaw, his neck, tasting salt and man, and something uniquely him. "I don't want you to stop." Chinhi stood in one smooth motion, lifting her with him, like she weighed nothing. Rania wrapped her legs around his waist, and he carried her through the house to his bedroom. The room was dark and masculine, with a king-sized bed that Chinhi laid her on gently. He stood at the edge, looking down at her with eyes gone black with wanting. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, his voice rough. Rania sat up and reached for the buttons of her blouse. "I'm not changing my mind." What happened next was slow and intense and perfect. Chinhi touched her like she was a treasure he'd been searching for his whole life, kissed every inch of skin he exposed, whispered words in Korean that sounded like worship. When they finally came together, Rania felt complete for the first time since her family died. Like a missing piece of her soul had clicked into place. Chinhi moved inside her with a gentleness that made tears spring to her eyes, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're mine," he breathed against her lips. "Say it." "I'm yours," Rania gasped, pleasure building inside her like a wave. "Chinhi, I'm yours." Afterwards, they lay tangled together, sweat cooling on their skin. Chinhi's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare back. "I haven't felt alive since Katya died," he said quietly into the darkness. "Every day was just surviving. Just getting through for Victor's sake. But you," his arms tightened around her, "you make me want to live again." Rania pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Then live. Live with me. Live for Victor. Live for us. Us." Chinhi tested the word. "I like the sound of that." They fell asleep, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, neither of them had nightmares. But outside, in the shadows of the estate, Gregor watched the bedroom window with narrowed eyes. He'd served Chinhi for 10 years, had helped him build his empire from nothing, had stood beside him through wars with rivals and betrayals from friends, and he'd never seen his boss show weakness until now. Gregor pulled out his phone and made a call. When the voice on the other end answered, he spoke in rapid Korean. "We have a problem. The boss has found a woman, an outsider. She's making him soft." The voice responded with a question. "Yes, I'm sure." Gregor's jaw tightened. "If she stays, she'll destroy everything we've built. We need to handle this soon." He hung up and disappeared into the night, already making plans. Inside, Chinhi and Rania slept on, unaware that their happiness had just painted a target on both their backs. 3 weeks had passed since that first night in Chinhi's bed, and Rania had never been happier. She'd officially quit her hospital job and moved into the mansion, taking over the guest suite next to Victor's nursery. During the days, she cared for the baby who'd stolen her heart. During the nights, she fell asleep in Chinhi's arms, learning every scar on his body and every shadow in his past. Well, almost every shadow. Chinhi still kept parts of himself locked away. He disappeared for hours sometimes, coming back with tension in his shoulders and blood on his knuckles. He took calls in Korean behind closed doors, his voice sharp with command. And he never, ever let her leave the estate without 2 guards trailing behind. "It's for your safety," he'd say whenever she questioned it. But Rania was starting to understand that safety in Chinhi's world meant something very different than it did in hers. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Rania was in the nursery, changing Victor's diaper while singing softly in Arabic. The baby giggled and grabbed her hair, and she laughed, gently untangling his tiny fingers. "You're getting so strong," she cooed. "Soon you'll be walking and getting into everything." The sound of breaking glass downstairs made her freeze. Then came the shouting. Men's voices, angry and loud. A gunshot cracked through the air, and Rania's heart stopped. Victor started crying immediately, sensing her fear. Rania scooped him up, her hands shaking, and backed toward the closet. Her nursing training kicked in. Find safety, protect the child, stay calm. She'd just reached the closet door when footsteps pounded up the stairs. "Please be Chinhi," she whispered, clutching Victor tight. "Please, please, please." The nursery door slammed open. 3 men rushed in, dressed in black, guns drawn. They weren't Chinhi's men. She'd learned to recognize all the guards by now. "There's the baby," one of them said in accented English. Korean, like Chinhi, but harsher. "Grab them both." No. Rania backed into the closet, but there was nowhere to go. "Don't hurt him, please, he's just a baby." The largest man reached for Victor, and Rania did the only thing she could think of. She bit his hand as hard as she could, tasting blood. The man roared and backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded through her cheek, and she fell, barely managing to twist so Victor didn't hit the floor. The baby's screams filled the room. "Stupid woman," the man snarled, raising his gun. Another gunshot. But this time, it was the man who fell. Chinhi stood in the doorway, gun in hand, his face a mask of cold fury Rana had never seen before. This wasn't the gentle man who held her at night. This was someone else entirely. Something else. A killer. You made a mistake coming here, Chinhi said, his voice deadly calm. He fired again, and a second intruder dropped. An extremely fatal mistake. The third man grabbed Rana, hauling her up and pressing a gun to her temple. Victor was crushed between them, wailing. Drop it, Volkov, or I paint the walls with her brain, the man said. Chinhi's eyes met Rana's. For just a second, she saw fear there. Real, raw fear. Then it was gone, replaced by calculating coldness. You're not going to shoot her, Chinhi said, taking a step forward. You came here to take them, not kill them, which means someone sent you. Someone who wants leverage against me. The gun pressed harder into Rana's skull. Don't come closer. Tell me who sent you, and I'll make your death quick. Another step. Chinhi moved like a predator, smooth and unhurried. Don't tell me, and I'll make it last days. The Kozlov brothers sent us. They said to take your son, show you that you're not untouchable anymore. The Kozlovs. Chinhi's lip curled. Those idiots never learn. Then, everything happened at once. Chinhi lunged forward, impossibly fast. The gun went off, so loud, Rana's ears rang. But Chinhi had already knocked the man's arm up, sending the bullet into the ceiling. In 3 brutal moves, he disarmed the intruder, broke his arm, and put him on the ground. The man screamed. Chinhi knelt on his chest and pressed his gun under the man's chin. How many more? Chinhi asked quietly. 6! 6 more downstairs! Good. Chinhi pulled the trigger without hesitation. Rana's stomach turned, and she had to swallow back bile. She'd seen death before in the hospital. But never like this. Never so cold and calculated. More gunfire erupted from downstairs. Shouting. Then silence. Chinhi's guards appeared in the doorway, weapons drawn. Boss, we got them all. The perimeter is secure. Good. Clean this up. Chinhi finally looked at Rana, and his expression shifted slightly, softened just a fraction. Are you hurt? Rana couldn't speak, couldn't move. She just stood there, holding Victor, staring at the 3 dead bodies on the nursery floor. Blood was spreading across the white carpet like spilled wine. Rana. Chinhi walked toward her slowly, hands raised like she was a spooked animal. Answer me. Are you hurt? You killed them, she whispered. Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Yes. No apology. No excuse. Just fact. You didn't even hesitate. No. He stopped a few feet away. I couldn't. Not when your life was at risk. Not when Victor's life was at risk. Victor had stopped crying and was now just sniffling against Rana's shoulder. She looked down at the baby, at his innocent face, and something inside her cracked. This child had almost died. She had almost died. Because of Chinhi's world. Because of choices he'd made long before she came into his life. Get him out of here, Chinhi said softly to one of the guards. Take him to the safe room. No. Rana's arms tightened around Victor. I'm not letting him go. Rana, there are bodies on the floor. He doesn't need to see this. He's 6 months old. He won't remember. Her voice cracked, and she felt tears start to fall. But I will. I'll remember this forever. Chinhi's jaw clenched. He turned to his guards. Leave us, and get this cleaned up immediately. The men disappeared, dragging the bodies with them. Within minutes, the room was empty, except for the bloodstains. Someone would deal with those later. Chinhi closed the distance between them. Give me Victor, please. After a moment, Rana handed over the baby. Chinhi held his son close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head, whispering soothing words in Korean. Victor calmed instantly, recognizing his father's voice. This is who I am, Chinhi said, his voice harder now, colder, like he was building walls between them. This is what my life looks like. Violence, death, enemies who would kill a baby just to hurt me. He looked at Rania with empty eyes. I'm a criminal. I hurt people. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew. You should hate me. You should take Victor and run as far from me as you can. He was testing her, pushing her away before she could leave on her own. Rania recognized the defense mechanism because she'd used it herself after her family died. She stepped forward and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. You're also a father who loves his son more than anything, she said softly. A man who's been hurt and did what he had to do to survive. A person who touches me like I'm precious, who holds me when I have nightmares, who makes me feel safe even in the middle of chaos. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. I see all of you, Chinhi. The good and the bad. The gentle and the violent. And I'm not running. Something broke in Chinhi's expression. You should be terrified of me right now. I am terrified, but not of you. She moved closer until there was no space between them, until Victor was cradled between their bodies. I'm terrified of losing you, of losing this, of going back to being empty and alone. Rania. Her name came out broken. I love you, she said, and watched his eyes widen. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I love you, not despite who you are, but because of it, because you're strong enough to protect the people you love, because you're honest about your darkness, instead of pretending it doesn't exist. I don't deserve you. Chinhi's voice was rough with emotion. Maybe not, but you have me anyway. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, Victor still between them. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Let me put him down, Chinhi said quietly. Then we need to talk, really talk. No more secrets. An hour later, Victor was asleep in his crib, a guard stationed outside his door. Chinhi led Rania to his office, a room she'd never been in before. Dark wood, expensive furniture, and walls lined with books in multiple languages. He poured them both whiskey and handed her a glass. Sit, please. Rania sat on the leather couch, and Chinhi sat beside her. For a long moment, he just stared into his drink. My father was a monster, he finally said. He worked for the Korean Mafia back in Moscow. Enforcer. He hurt people for money, and when he came home drunk, he hurt my mother and me. Chinhi's hands tightened around his glass. I was 14 when I killed him. He was beating my mother so badly, I thought she would die. So I grabbed his gun and I shot him. Rania's breath caught, but she didn't speak, just listened. The organization he worked for found out. They said I had two choices, work for them or die. So I worked, started as a runner, then moved up. Learned how to fight, how to shoot, how to make people afraid. His voice was flat, emotionless. When I was 18, they sent me to Chicago to help establish territory. I was good at it, too good. By 25, I was running everything. And Katya? Rania asked softly. She was the daughter of a rival boss. Our marriage was supposed to unite the families, stop the war. Chinhi's expression softened slightly. But I actually fell in love with her. She knew what I was, what I did, and she accepted it. For 7 years, we were happy. Then she got pregnant, and everything changed. What do you mean? I started wanting out. Started thinking about leaving this life behind, raising Victor somewhere normal. He drained his whiskey in one swallow. But you don't just leave. The organization owns you. And when they found out I was planning to run, they made sure Katya's doctors missed the signs of her complication. They let her die as a warning. Horror washed over Rania. They killed her? Not directly, but they made sure she wouldn't survive. Showed me what happens when you try to leave. Chinhi set down his glass with shaking hands. So I stayed, buried my grief in work, became harder, colder, more ruthless, made myself untouchable so no one would ever threaten my son again. Until I came along. Until you came along. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were wet. You made me feel again. Made me hope again. And now you're a target too, just like Katya was. Rana set down her own glass and took both his hands in hers. Then, we'll be careful. We'll be smart, but I'm not leaving you. You could die. His voice broke. The Kozlovs will try again. Others will see you as a weakness. They'll come for you to get to me. Let them try. Rana squeezed his hands. I'm not some delicate flower, Chinhi. I grew up in Cairo. I've seen violence. I've treated gunshot wounds and stab victims. I'm stronger than you think. I know you're strong. He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her neck. But the thought of losing you terrifies me more than anything. They held each other as the sun set outside, painting the office in shades of orange and red. Chinhi told her everything. Every secret he'd been keeping, the full extent of his empire, the enemies he had, the blood on his hands. And Rana listened without judgment, occasionally pressing kisses to his temple, his cheek, his lips. I haven't cried since I was a child, Chinhi admitted as darkness fell. My father beat the tears out of me, told me crying was weakness. Crying isn't weakness. Rana held him tighter. It's being human. And then, for the first time in 20 years, Chinhi cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for his mother, who died when he was 16. For Katya, who should have lived. For the life he could have had if circumstances had been different. For the innocence he'd lost at 14 when he took his first life. Rana held him through all of it, her own tears falling silently. She whispered words of comfort in Arabic, stroked his hair, and let him break apart in her arms. I love you, Chinhi said when he could finally speak again. His eyes were red, his face blotchy. He'd never looked more beautiful to her. I love you so much, it scares me. I love you too. Rana kissed him softly. We'll figure this out together, I promise. That night, their lovemaking was different, slower, more intense. Chinhi touched her like she might disappear if he let go, whispered promises against her skin in Korean and English. Made her come apart 3 times before he finally let himself fall over the edge. Afterwards, tangled together in his bed, Rana traced the tattoos on his chest. What do these mean? This one? He touched a dagger on his ribs, means I've killed for the organization. This one, a star on his shoulder, means I'm a captain. And this one, he pointed to a new tattoo over his heart, still healing, is Victor's name in Korean. It's beautiful. Rana kissed it gently. When this heals, will you add my name too? Chinhi's arms tightened around her. Yes, right next to his. The 2 most important people in my world. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, pretending that love could protect them from what was coming. But in a warehouse across Chicago, the Kozlov brothers were already planning their next move. And this time, they wouldn't fail. The text message came on a Thursday morning while Chinhi was in a meeting with his accountants. Asterisk. We have your woman. Come alone to the address below by midnight or we start sending you pieces of her. No police, no guards, just you. Asterisk. Chinhi's blood turned to ice as he opened the attached photo. Rana, tied to a chair, a bruise darkening her cheek. But her eyes were defiant, angry instead of afraid. That was his Rana, strong even when she should be terrified. Meeting's over, Chinhi said, his voice deadly calm. Everyone out, now. His men scattered. Within seconds, Gregor appeared in the doorway, concern on his weathered face. Boss? They took her. Chinhi showed him the phone. The Kozlovs. Gregor swore in Korean. When? This morning. She went to the grocery store with 2 guards. Chinhi was already pulling up the security feed on his computer. I told her not to leave the estate. The footage showed Rana laughing at something one of the guards said as they walked through the parking lot. Then a van pulled up. 6 men with guns. The guards went down before they could even draw their weapons. Rana fought, kicking and screaming, but they overpowered her and threw her in the van. The whole thing took 45 seconds. Chinhi watched it 3 times, memorizing every detail. The license plate, the faces, the way one man grabbed Rainia's hair and she spit in his face. "I'm going to kill every single one of them," Chinhi said quietly, slowly. "They said come alone. I don't care what they said." Chinhi stood and opened the safe behind his desk. Inside were enough weapons to start a small war. Call everyone, every man we have, every favor we're owed. I want the Kozlov brothers found in the next hour. Chinhi. Gregor's voice was careful. "You know this is a trap." "I don't care. They'll kill you." "Then they kill me." Chinhi loaded a gun with practiced ease. "But not before I size. Get her out." Gregor was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out his own phone. "I'll make the calls." The next 3 days were the longest of Chinhi's life. His men searched everywhere. Gregor tortured information out of low-level Kozlov associates. Chinhi barely slept, barely ate. Victor cried constantly, sensing something was wrong. And Chinhi had to hire a temporary nanny just to keep his son fed and changed. Every hour without Rana felt like a year. Every second she was with those animals made rage build in Chinhi's chest until he thought he might explode from it. On the 3rd day, they finally got a lead. One of the Kozlov's lieutenants, drunk in a bar, bragging about the Egyptian woman they'd grabbed, how she'd cursed at them in Arabic, how even tied up and beaten, she wouldn't beg. That was all Chinhi needed. The warehouse was on the south side, isolated and surrounded by abandoned buildings, perfect for what the Kozlovs had planned, a final showdown. Chinhi arrived at midnight exactly as instructed. But he wasn't alone. 20 of his best men surrounded the building, silent and invisible in the darkness. The front door was unlocked. Chinhi walked through it, both hands up, to show he was unarmed. A lie, of course. He had a knife in his boot, a gun at the small of his back, and enough rage in his heart to tear through anyone who stood between him and Rana. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for support columns and old machinery. In the center, under a single light, Rana was tied to a chair. Chinhi's heart clenched. She was alive, but they'd hurt her. Blood crusted her split lip. Her left eye was swollen shut. Bruises covered her arms. But when she saw him, she smiled. "You idiot," she said, her voice hoarse. "I told them you wouldn't come alone." "Actually, I did." Chinhi walked toward her, scanning the shadows for threats. Technically, 3 men stepped out from behind the columns. Then 3 more. Then the Kozlov brothers themselves, identical twins, with cruel faces and dead eyes. "Chinhi," one of them said, finally. "Do you know how long we've been waiting to put a bullet in your head?" "Since I killed your father, I'm guessing." Chinhi stopped 10 feet from Rana. "But he deserved it. Came into my territory, hurt my people. What did you expect? We expected you to have the decency to die like a man instead of hiding behind an empire." The other brother pulled out a gun. "But then you got soft, found yourself a woman, made yourself vulnerable. Touching her was your first mistake," Chinhi said quietly. "Your last mistake will be thinking you'll walk out of here alive." The brother laughed. "You're outnumbered, Volkov. Your woman dies first. Then we'll go get that baby of yours and raise him to hate his father's memory." Chinhi's control snapped. Now, the windows exploded inward as his men came through in a coordinated assault. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The Rappland. Kozlov's men went down fast, surprised and outmaneuvered. Chinhi moved like water, smooth and deadly. He took down 2 men before they could even aim their weapons. A third came at him with a knife, and Chinhi broke his arm and used his own blade to cut his throat. One of the Kozlov brothers tried to grab Rana, use her as a human shield. Chinhi shot him in the knee, then the shoulder, then walked up and put the final bullet between his eyes. "That's for touching her," Chinhi said to the corpse. The second brother tried to run. Gregor caught him at the door and dragged him back, throwing him at Chinhi's feet. "Please," the man begged. "Please, I'll leave Chicago. You'll never see me again." Chinhi looked at Rana, at her bruised face and split lip, at the way she was shaking despite trying to look strong. "You hurt her," Chinhi said simply. Then he pulled the trigger. In the sudden silence, Chinhi finally reached Rana. His hands shook as he cut her restraints. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Tell me you're okay." "I'm okay." Rana threw her arms around his neck, and Chinhi felt her tears soak into his shirt. "I knew you'd come." "I knew it." "I'm sorry." Chinhi buried his face in her hair, breathing in her scent. She smelled like fear and blood and jasmine. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. All of it." "Get me out of here," Rana whispered. "Please, just get me out of here." Chinhi carried her out of the warehouse like she weighed nothing. His men cleaned up the mess, erasing any evidence they'd been there. By morning, the warehouse would be empty. The bodies would be gone. And the Chicago police would have no idea that a small war had been fought on the South Side. At the hospital, Chinhi paced outside Rania's room while doctors examined her. Gregor stood with him. Silent support. "She'll be okay," Gregor said finally. "She's strong. She shouldn't have to be strong." Chinhi's hands clenched into fists. She should be safe, happy, not traumatized because of me. She knew what she was getting into. No, she didn't. Not really. Chinhi leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I should have pushed her away harder, should have made her leave before she got in too deep. Would she have left? Chinhi thought about Rania's stubborn chin, her fierce eyes, the way she'd stood in that warehouse bruised and bleeding but unbroken. No, he admitted. She wouldn't have. The doctor finally emerged. "She's going to be fine. Bruised ribs, some contusions, but nothing broken. We want to keep her overnight for observation, but she should make a full recovery." Relief flooded through Chinhi so intensely he almost collapsed. "Can I see her?" "She's asking for you." Chinhi went in alone. Rana was in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile in the papery gown. But when she saw him, her face lit up. "Come here," she said, reaching out. Chinhi sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand carefully, like she might break. "I almost lost you, but you didn't. I could have, if my men hadn't found that drunk lieutenant. If we'd been 1 hour later." His voice cracked. "This life destroys everything I love. First Katya, now almost you. How many more people have to suffer because of choices I made?" Rana squeezed his hand. "Then leave it. Walk away. Choose us. Choose Victor." "Choose me. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." She sat up, wincing but determined. "You're Chinhi. You built an empire from nothing. You command loyalty from hundreds of men. If you want out, you get out. They'll never let me go. Make them." Rana touched his face, forcing him to look at her. "You're always talking about power and respect and control. But what's the point of any of it if you're too afraid to choose happiness, if you let them dictate your entire life?" Chinhi stared at her, and something shifted inside him. She was right. When had he become so focused on the empire that he forgot why he'd built it in the first place? He'd wanted security, safety for his family, a legacy for his son. But what kind of legacy was fear and violence? "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll get us out." He kissed her gently, carefully avoiding her split lip. "For you, for Victor, for the life we could have." The negotiations took 2 weeks. Chinhi met with every major player in Chicago's underworld, offered them pieces of his territory, settled old debts, made promises. Some called him weak, said he was letting a woman control him. But Chinhi didn't care. He'd spent 20 years proving his strength through violence. Walking away took more courage than staying ever would. In the end, they agreed. Chinhi would step down, hand over his operations to Gregor, and leave Chicago. In return, his family would be untouchable. Anyone who came after them would face the wrath of every organization in the city. "You're sure about this?" Gregor asked, the night before Chinhi left. They sat in the office, sharing a final drink. "More sure than I've been about anything." Chinhi looked at the photo on his desk. Rania holding Victor, both of them smiling at the camera. I've been dead for 3 years. She brought me back to life. I'm not wasting the second chance. Where will you go? West Coast, small city, new names. Chinhi stood and extended his hand. Thank you for everything. Gregor shook it firmly. Take care of them, boss. They're good people. I will, with my life. That night, Chinhi made love to Rania slowly, worshipping every inch of her healing body. They didn't talk about tomorrow or the future, just lived in that perfect moment, holding each other as the past fell away and the future waited just beyond the horizon. I love you, Rania whispered in the darkness. Thank you for choosing us. I love you too. Chinhi kissed her forehead. Always. And for the first time in 20 years, Chinhi felt free. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows of babushkas, casting golden light across the flour-dusted counters and gleaming copper pots. Chinhi stood at the stove, stirring a pot of borscht that would have made his grandmother weep with pride. 6 months in Portland, and he'd never been happier. His hands, which had once held guns and broken bones, now kneaded dough and chopped vegetables. The transformation still surprised him sometimes. Smells amazing, Rania said, walking in with Victor balanced on her hip. The baby was almost a year old now, chubby and happy, and babbling constantly. What is it? Family recipe. Chinhi turned and kissed her, then planted a raspberry on Victor's cheek that made the baby shriek with laughter. Borscht. My grandmother used to make it every Sunday. Tell me about her. Rania settled Victor in his high chair and began cutting up soft pieces of banana for him. Chinhi smiled, something he did easily now. She was the only person who was ever kind to me as a child. When my father would beat me, she'd hide me in her apartment and feed me until the bruises faded. She taught me to cook because she said a man who could feed himself would never be helpless. I wish I could have met her. Rania came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. She would have loved you. Chinhi turned in her embrace. Almost as much as I do. They'd been living as David and Layla Morrison for 6 months now, simple names for their simple life. Chinhi had used his considerable hidden savings to buy a small restaurant in a quiet Portland neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just good food, reasonable prices, and regulars who came in weekly. Nobody here knew about Chicago, about the Kozlovs or the empire he'd walked away from. Here, he was just David, the guy who made incredible Korean food and told terrible jokes. Layla was the warm manager who remembered everyone's names and always had a kind word. And Victor was just a happy baby who charmed every customer who walked through the door. We open in an hour, Rania said, checking her watch. Are you ready? Always. Chinhi kissed the top of her head. Go get the dining room set up. I'll finish prep. The day passed in the comfortable rhythm they'd developed. Morning rush with office workers grabbing breakfast. Lunch crowd of students from the nearby college. Afternoon lull where Chinhi prepped for dinner while Rania did paperwork and Victor napped in the office. Around 3, an older woman came in. Mrs. Chen, one of their regulars. She always ordered the same thing. Chicken soup and black bread. How's that grandson of yours? Chinhi asked as he brought out her order. Getting into everything now that he's walking. Mrs. Chen smiled. Your little one will be there soon. I can't wait. And Chinhi meant it. Every milestone Victor hit filled him with joy instead of the fear he'd felt in Chicago. Here, his son could just be a normal kid. That evening, after the dinner rush ended and the last customer left, Chinhi locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Rania was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes, humming softly to herself. Victor had already been picked up by their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who watched him in the evenings. The restaurant was quiet, except for the sound of running water and Rania's voice. Chinhi stood in the doorway, just watching her. She'd changed in the past 6 months, too. The haunted look in her eyes had faded. She smiled more, laughed freely. The trauma of her kidnapping had left scars, but she was healing. They both were. She turned and caught him staring. What? Just thinking about how lucky I am. Chinhi walked toward her, pulling something from his pocket. How you changed my entire life in one night. Chinhi. Rana dried her hands on a towel, her eyes widening as she saw what he held. Is that what I think it is? Rana, 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 Rana. Depends. He got down on one knee, right there in their restaurant kitchen, holding out a simple gold band with a single diamond. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that would draw attention. Just perfect. Are you thinking that I'm about to ask you to marry me? Rana's hand flew to her mouth, tears already spilling down her cheeks. You saved Victor's life that first night in Chicago, Chinhi said, his voice thick with emotion. When I was lost and desperate and had no idea how to help my son, you walked up to a complete stranger and offered kindness. But you didn't just save Victor. You saved me too. Chinhi, she whispered. I was dead inside, going through the motions of living but not actually alive, drowning in grief and guilt and violence. He swallowed hard. Then you smiled at me with those golden eyes. And suddenly I could breathe again. Suddenly I had a reason to be better, to do better. Rana was crying openly now, but she was also smiling. That beautiful smile that lit up his entire world. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. Chinhi continued, waking up next to you, building this life together, watching Victor grow, with both of us there to love him. It's everything I never knew I wanted. Yes, Rana said, nodding frantically. Yes, yes, yes. Chinhi laughed. I haven't asked yet. I don't care. The answer is yes, Rana. He took her hand, and she was shaking. Or maybe he was shaking. Maybe they both were. Will you marry me? Be Victor's mother officially? Be my wife? Be my forever? Yes. She pulled him up and kissed him hard, tears mixing between their lips. 1,000 times yes. 1,000,000 times yes. Chinhi slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it was always meant to be there, like she was always meant to be his. I love you, he breathed against her mouth, more than I ever thought possible. I love you too. Rana pulled back just enough to look at the ring. It's beautiful, simple and perfect, just like our life now. No more running, no more looking over our shoulders. Chinhi cupped her face in his hands. Just us, just our family, just forever. They made love, right there in the kitchen, urgent and passionate. Chinhi lifted Rana onto the counter, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was a vow. This was different from their early desperate couplings in Chicago, when danger lurked around every corner. Different from the intense nights after her rescue, when they clung to each other like lifelines. This was certain, solid, built on the foundation of a life they'd chosen together. I want to give you everything, Chinhi said later, as they lay tangled together on the couch in the small office. A big house, expensive things. The world. I don't want the world. Rana traced patterns on his chest. I just want this. You, me, Victor, our little restaurant, our quiet life. Are you sure? Because I have money hidden away. We could go anywhere. Do anything. I'm sure. She propped herself up on one elbow and looked down at him. In Chicago, you had everything. Power, respect, wealth. But you weren't happy. Here, you have almost nothing by comparison. But look at you. You smile every single day. You laugh. You play with Victor without constantly watching for threats. This is what happiness looks like. Chinhi pulled her down for another kiss. You're right, as always. Get used to saying that. Rana grinned. I expect to hear it a lot once we're married. They talked for hours about their wedding. Nothing big or fancy. Just a small ceremony at the courthouse, maybe dinner with their few close friends afterwards. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mrs. Chen would definitely be invited. Maybe the college students who came in every Tuesday for pierogi. What about your side? Rana asked carefully. Is there anyone from your old life you'd want there? Chinhi thought about Gregor, who'd been like a brother to him for 10 years, about the few men he trusted with his life. But bringing them here would connect his old world to his new one, would risk everything he'd built. No, he said finally. That life is over. Those relationships ended when I walked away. This is a fresh start. For all of us. Rana nodded, understanding without judgment. Then it's just us, our little family, our perfect family. They picked up Victor from Mrs. Rodriguez around midnight. The baby was already asleep, his little face peaceful. Chinhi carried him to their modest house 3 blocks from the restaurant, while Rana walked beside them holding his free hand. Their home was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely bigger than a closet. Nothing like the mansion in Chicago, but it was filled with love and laughter and the ordinary chaos of raising a baby. Chinhi laid Victor in his crib gently, and they stood together watching him sleep. The baby's chest rose and fell steadily. One tiny fist curled near his face. He's going to have a good life, Rana whispered. A normal childhood. Friends in school and birthday parties. Everything you never had. Everything I always wanted for him. Chinhi wrapped his arms around Rana from behind. He'll never know fear the way I did. Never have to make the choices I made. He'll just be a regular kid who grows up knowing he's loved. By both his parents. Rana leaned back against him. We're his parents now. Really? Yes, we are. They went to their own bedroom, and this time their lovemaking was slow and tender. A celebration of their engagement and their future. Chinhi touched Rana like she was the most precious thing in the world, because to him, she was. Afterwards, as they lay in the darkness, Rana's engagement ring catching the moonlight from the window, Chinhi finally understood something he'd been too blind to see for years. Real power wasn't controlling others through fear. It wasn't building empires or commanding armies of men. Real power was loving someone so completely that you'd give up everything else for them. It was having the courage to walk away from the life you knew, because staying meant destroying what you loved most. What are you thinking about? Rana asked sleepily. That I spent 20 years chasing the wrong things. Chinhi kissed her shoulder. I thought power meant being feared, being untouchable. But I was wrong. What does power mean? This. He pulled her closer. Having someone who chooses you every single day. Who sees all your darkness and loves you anyway. Who makes you want to be better just by existing? He paused. You're my power now. You and Victor, my reason for everything. Rana turned in his arms and kissed him softly. We're going to be so happy. I know it. We already are. And as they drifted off to sleep, wrapped around each other in their small bedroom in their modest house in their quiet neighborhood, Chinhi felt something he'd never felt before. Complete, absolute peace. Victor slept soundly in the next room, safe and loved. Rana wore his ring, a promise of forever. Their restaurant would open again tomorrow, feeding their community and building their life one meal at a time. The past was behind them. Chicago, the violence, the fear. All of it was just memory now. And the future stretched ahead, bright and full of possibility. Chinhi had finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life, without even knowing it. Not power or respect or wealth, just love. Simple, uncomplicated, transformative love. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and let's build our community together. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, what you thought about Chinhi and Rana's journey. We love hearing from you.